This is the Crowdcrux Crowdfunding Podcast with Sal Briggman, where we cover everything you need to know to launch a successful crowdfunding campaign. We speak with proven entrepreneurs who've raised money from the crowd and want to teach you how to do the same. Stay tuned because we're about to reveal how to launch your dream project. With your host, Sal Briggman.
Before we get started with this podcast episode, I want to take a second to introduce you to my friends at Fulfillrite. If you need help shipping out your Kickstarter or Indiegogo perks or rewards, Fulfillrite is the absolute best company for you. I've been working with them for a while and I can vouch for their services. They make it dead simple and take all of the headache out of shipping out all of those boxes, all of those orders to your backers and your customers. If you want to check them out, go to fulfillrite.com at fulfillrite.com. What up, crowdfunders? Salvador Briggman here. Hope you're having an amazing day, and also that you've had a chance to dive into the archives of the podcast. You've checked out some of the other episodes I've done with killer entrepreneurs, people who have raised 6 and 7 figures on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. And if you don't know by now, my name is Sal, and on this podcast, we talk about really what goes into a successful crowdfunding campaign. So how can you replicate these entrepreneurs' strategies? How can you copy what's working and implement it into your own crowdfunding campaign? So that way you can raise funds, you can get traffic, you can get attention. And I think the important part of this entire process is actually getting the product into the hands of people so that at that point in time, they can actually begin to give you some feedback. You can then go from there and launch another project or come out with another product or improve on it. This is really an organic process where it's not like you're just launching a campaign and getting funding, which is great. It's obviously great to get funding for your project. But at the same time, what's more valuable than the funding is the feedback you will get and also the indication of demand. This is a project you should spend way more time on, you should put more money into in terms of marketing it, all this kind of stuff. And that's a lesson that I learned from today's podcast episode. So the interview today is with a project that has raised over $1 million on Kickstarter. It's a very unique product. And it's in a category that's not necessarily all that popular. Like, I haven't seen too many of these types of products on Kickstarter. This is the Quartz bottle, which is a water purification and self-cleaning bottle for athletes, for people that are going running, for people that just use water bottles, hikers, etc. This is a really cool product, but also a lot of what Justin had to say today in terms of what goes into this successful campaign, what the campaign did right, how he got funding, how they got traffic, how they got media attention, all of these different tactics and techniques, the things that he went into. The number one takeaway that I had, and there were many, the number one was that of all of the things that they did, the most valuable is what they learned throughout this process, particularly about their customers, about how they're going to improve the bottle going forward, and also how they realize actually that this actual bottle, there's actually more demand for certain reward tiers than other tiers than they expected. So they share all of that with you. They share a ton of great strategies if you're going into a crowdfunding campaign. And also, if you're interested in checking them out, he'll also tell you where you can do that. So the one other thing I want to say before we get into this podcast episode is that if you have not yet, and you're listening to this podcast on your smartphone, on the iPhone, and you have the podcast app open, take a second and hit subscribe. That way you'll get a notification on your phone every single time I come out with a new episode. And also, if you're listening to this on your desktop or your laptop computer and you want to subscribe, get notifications, and also when I come out with new content, new YouTube videos, new blog posts, new content that you can use to actually accelerate the progress of your funding campaign, you can go to crowdcrux.com/subscribe and enter your email address there. That is crowdcrux.com/subscribe. Just enter your email address and you will join my weekly newsletter. Without further ado, Let's learn how this project raised over $1 million on Kickstarter and has racked up more than 9,000 backers. It's coming up right after this. Justin, I am excited to have you on the podcast. You have an amazing Kickstarter run here. Looking at your campaign right now, you've hit the $1 million mark with still 7 days to go. Over 9,000 backers with the crowdfunding platform, nearly 10,000, honestly. It's been a wild ride, I imagine, and I'm looking forward to getting into that, your product, everything you've learned. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Salvador. Thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about this product, because this is actually a problem that I experienced in my own life because I love to go to the gym. I love running. So could you tell people a little bit about the product?
Definitely. I think the best consumer products are products that solve for a problem, a personal problem. And I think some of them, we're passionate about this product because it is a problem that I've had in the past.
I think a lot of people have it, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And whenever there's so many options out there, right, where there's almost too many choices in terms of how many reusable bottles there are for every function, every color, every shape. But really, what I found myself asking is, why am I still reaching for that plastic bottle? And read some research that said, plastic bottle water usage is at an all-time high despite all the interest in Swell, Contigo, Hydro Flask, you name it.
So the issue is here, like, I will go to the gym on, let's just say 3 times a week, and I have to either buy like reusable bottles, but I've tried in the past to have, like a normal sports bottle I can take on runs, or I can go to the gym. But the problem is it gets really dirty over time, and it smells horrible. And I also have to carry it around and, all these different things. But the main thing is that when I forget to wash it one day, it just smells horrible for the rest of the week. I spend a week literally washing this bottle, and then, I can use it for a little bit more, but eventually I'm just gonna have to buy another one. It's just like a big pain. So what I do is I just use reusable bottles. I use disposable bottles, but it kind of feels bad to me. Like, I don't want to be using this plastic all the time. So you invented this solution to it. So what exactly is like the quartz bottle? What can people use it for?
So the quartz bottle is the world's first self-cleaning bottle with built-in water purification. In our research, what we found with consumers is that there's 2 large pain points when it comes to kind of weaning off our dependence on plastic bottles. One is exactly as you mentioned, is that smelly, stinky bottle. And the second is that being able to access safe drinking water and purified drinking water on the go. So we kind of hit both of these major pain points for the consumer in one solution. So what we've done is put a proprietary UVC LED into the cap of this bottle, and with a touch of a button, it will turn on for 60 seconds, or you can set it into what we call adventure mode, which gives it an extra dose. And it will also automatically turn on for every 4 hours for about 15 to 20 seconds to self-clean and to make sure that even if you left it, as you said, in your gym bag, in your car, in the hot summer, that it will still continue to self-clean and maintain kind of both the surface of the bottle, but also the water inside it. So when you go back, you can actually just pick it up, you can drink from it. You won't have to worry about the odor and the mold that might be growing.
Okay, so it will clean the bottle. It also purifies the water and has a really cool design, at least from what I'm seeing here on the Kickstarter page.
Yeah, we went with a very minimalist design. We had a great industrial design team that we worked with out in New York called Impel. And they've done some really great work before. And together with them, our engineering team, as well as our consumer team, we put together, I think, a great design. We wanted to make sure that, we weren't just addressing a niche market like some of the other UV products out there, but really solving for some of the main problems that the average consumer would have.
So can I ask you kind of a dumb question here? Like, is that safe, like to have UV light in the bottle? Is that really something that, I'm not going to end up hurting myself in the long run? Is that safe for consumers?
Great question. UV light is absolutely safe. It has been used in from hospital operating rooms to municipal water treatment facilities for many years, right? The difference in our technology versus some of the other things out there primarily is in this LED. Traditionally, you would use a mercury-based glass tube as your UV source. The difference is that our product is UV free. It has all the advantages that a LED would have versus traditional lighting. Right, it's more efficient. It is instant on. It lasts for longer. It's more battery efficient. The form factor is smaller. So all those things allow us for the first time to be able to put it in a very consumer application. Right,
very cool.
Allowed us to make this product.
Very cool. I have to ask you, man, did you expect to actually hit this $1 million mark? Because off of a $30,000 goal, that is phenomenal. Like, what was that like to be able to say now that you've raised $1 million on Kickstarter?
Man, Salvador, I got to say, it was pretty nuts, pretty crazy. Of course, you always hope for it. You always plan your campaign, plan your strategy, your communications, and your product as if it's going to be a hit. But I also don't think you should ever plan to bank on the 7-figure mark. We knew we had a great product, and we knew we were probably going to do pretty well based on our early surveys and our early discussions with potential consumers and everything. But obviously, hitting that $1 million mark was very exciting. I remember sitting kind of in our war room at the office, counting down the minutes as we launched. It was like something like 4 a.m. in the morning Pacific time. And even before we hit the go button, we were something like 20% sold through our super early bird or first bird kind of rewards. So that's when we knew it was like, oh, wait, people are kind of finding us even before we published. And of course, as soon as we hit the go button, we were out of our earliest perks within 15, 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Can you walk me through a little bit of where you were in your life before you actually launched this project? Like, how long have you been working on this? What was your role in the venture? Can you give the listeners a little bit idea of that?
Sure. So I come from a very kind of a non-traditional background for consumer products. I actually started out my career as a banker, and then transitioned into consumer products, private equity for a while, but ultimately, you
made the right choice.
Ultimately, back in 2014, I kind of transitioned into the operations and entrepreneurial side. I joined a firm called Foreo, F-R-E-O, that was kind of starting a consumer health beauty devices company, and I helped them to grow the North American market as well as launch many of their products. So that became a big success. But ultimately, I wanted to do something on my own. I met some of my co-founders just over a year ago who were developing this awesome technology. They were looking to put this into a consumer application specifically for water. So we started talking about this probably almost a year ago, but ultimately really dug in and started doing the design work earlier this year. So my background is really in helping to launch and grow successful consumer products.
That's a pretty fast timeline, though. To do that in a year's span, to go from the product to launching this to now being a major success, that's a pretty aggressive timeline there. What was it like when you were doing the surveys? I'd really love to hear a little bit about that. When you're trying to determine what people liked about it, or even what kind of product to put the technology in, how did you conduct those surveys or get that kind of initial response?
Yeah, so we designed a survey that was, fairly straightforward, to the point. I think it was about 40, 50 questions. We wanted to know how people interacted with their water bottles, with their water pitchers, with just how they drank, and what were their pain points that we could help to solve for. We got about, through our network of friends and family and just kind of pestering people we know, I think we got something like over 200 something responses. We thought that was a big enough data point to draw some conclusions. And luckily, it was very clear. It confirmed many of our, initial thesis. But we were also able to kind of refine the product, right? better based on that feedback initially.
And how did you get people to take the survey?
Oh, it was just friends and family and people we knew. So pestering them and asking for favors. Obviously, in the early days, we didn't have a very big budget. But of course, we also see our early backers, right? Even before we launched our Kickstarter campaign, we really wanted to engage with the community. And we reached out to finalize some things like, some of the colors, some of the accessories, even some of the functionality, even as late as, a couple months before the campaign.
You mentioned earlier doing a little bit of research on my own site, and I imagine some other sites in the industry about marketing and what goes into a campaign. What was your pre-launch like? Did you gather an email list at all? Did you do anything in the way of media? Did you do anything in the pre-launch to sort of set this up for success? Because you guys hit your goal fairly early. I think it was in the first 15 minutes of launch. Is that right?
Well, we ran out of our perks in the first 15 minutes of launch that we thought was going to be there for a few days. But we hit our goal actually within 4 to 5 minutes.
Oh, excuse me, 4 to 5 minutes.
Of course, we always wanted to surpass our goal. But, it was very surprising. But we did do a lot of planning. We had a great team that worked with both in my previous life, but also joined us here. And, we put, I think, a very robust plan together to make sure we're engaging with the community. We read CrowdCrux, we did a lot of research. And actually, for many of us, it wasn't our first campaign. And it wasn't the first successful campaign either. So we did do quite a bit of engagement, I would say, somewhere between 6 to 8 weeks leading up to the campaign. A lot of, kind of creative work, design work to make sure we had great content, great visuals and copy to really communicate what the product is about, and to really kind of make it come alive on the page, if you will.
I love your video.
Yeah, thanks. We had a great team working on that video. And ultimately, about 4 weeks out, I would say, from the campaign launch, we started doing a lot more kind of pre-communication, pre-marketing via Facebook, and to create a I would say early community even before the launch that would be involved in finalizing some of the product features, but also trying to engage with them to tell the full story of the problems that we're trying to solve, as well as kind of the journey creatively.
Okay, so it looks like the main things you were doing are, number one, the actual creative marketing on the campaign page, making sure that you have that right. And then number two, going out there and trying to either engage people on Facebook. I don't know if there are any other social channels that you use, but it kind of looks like that was sort of your pre-launch. So you ended up hitting launch, you went live. It seems like it instantly got attention as a result of that. But at the same time, you've been able to sustain this. You've been growing the momentum. I'm looking at your KickTrack stats, and your first few days you got to like 300, maybe 400K, but you went even further the next few weeks. How did you maintain the momentum with the project? Like, what did you do?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. From our experience doing Kickstarter or Indiegogo campaigns before, we knew kind of the middle 20 days or so, let's say 2 weeks to 20 days, are going to be a slower kind of a lull that you want to kind of plan for ahead of time, right? So we wanted to make sure that we had plenty of updates, that we were engaging with people, that we were designing good stretch goals, as well as potential specials for our existing backers. We used some services like Kick Booster. We had a lot of PR go live that really helped to sustain the momentum. So I think PR is a big part of it. We were lucky enough to get covered on Now This and Forbes and Business Insider, Yanko Design. So some of that coverage was really good. And I think that helped to sustain the momentum. And Kickstarter actually picked us up. We were communicating with Kickstarter fairly early on and pitching them on their curation team on covering us. So being able to get into their newsletter, but also it's all about building a snowball, I believe, right? You want to make sure from the beginning you're leveraging what you build on the first 24 hours to continue that snowball, to continue that momentum. And once it's big enough, it's almost self-sustaining. Kickstarter's algorithm will pick you up and put it, in the popular section. We had a lot of traction from there. And we also did do a little bit of advertising to make sure that, we were seeding that interest and we're seeding that momentum as well.
For these larger media publications and getting onto publications, bloggers, getting them to write about you, how did you do that? Was that all organic, or did you actually reach out to these people? Did you pitch them the story? Can you shed some light on how to get media publications to write about you like that? I had to interrupt this podcast episode because I want to introduce you to my friends at The Gadget Flow. Their product discovery platform reaches 22 million people per month. They've helped more than 5,000 crowdfunding campaigns thus far, and they have a social media following of more than 700,000 followers. If you want to gain access to their marketplace and list your own product, you can go to thegadgetflow.com/submit and list your project today.
Sure. I think you have to have a thick face and be willing to be rejected many, many times. So we started with a list of something like, several hundred people that we've researched to have either written about a Kickstarter or Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign, or have written about something that was related to water safety, water bottles, water bottle design. So we really did a lot of homework, I would say even 2-3 months before, to come up with a short list of people that had an interest in this space. And then we pinged them through social media. We pinged them on the email. We basically just went through this list, right? It's like anything. It's a conversion funnel. And some people are going to think your idea is silly, or other people they're going to totally resonate, right? And I know it's become harder and harder to get coverage for Kickstarter and Indiegogo campaigns because obviously some reporters have been burned by campaigns that did not follow through or never delivered. So it's also about making sure that you're addressing their potential concerns about covering Kickstarter or Indiegogo campaigns, and showing them that, hey, offering product demos, offering video demos, offering maybe exclusive quotes and things like this. Reporters really are interested in that story. And obviously having a great product helps, and that's kind of the foundation. But if you have that covered, you have a good creative cover that is able to tell that story. I would say just be relentless and go through kind of curate a list ahead of time, and don't be afraid to be rejected, and don't be afraid to follow up. Right? We had some coverage come through that was a result of us following up after we hit our initial goal, after we became the largest hydration product ever funded, and even after we hit $1 million. Right? So kind of think about your milestones as also being interesting milestones for a reporter, and think from them, from their perspective, what is interesting content, what is interesting messaging for what they're writing about. For some reporters, it might be all about the design, right? For Yanko Design, our angle was very much design, minimalist, how that design process. For someone like a Forbes, it was more about addressing the kind of the business side of it, addressing the opportunity that we saw in the market.
So it's really putting yourself in the shoes of someone else to figure out what it is that they're interested in, what it is their community wants, and sort of pitching them in that way and making it so it's a good piece or a good article for the blogger, the journalist. I think that's a really great way to approach it. And also it obviously shows with your results that having that kind of a strategy is actually going to give you results. But as you said, you have to be willing to go through a lot of rejection. You have to be willing to keep putting yourself out there and not really realize that you're not going to get a 1-for-1. Like you contact one person and then they write about you. It's like it's obviously a numbers game to a certain extent. I did want to ask you, Justin. So you've had a lot of experience here. Working in finance, working in banking, then going on to operations, these different projects. For you, with this campaign, what has been the most rewarding or the most satisfying component of working on this project?
I think 100% working with the team at Quartz, developing the product and launching this project, and also having such a great and engaged community. I think we have something like, even before we launched, we were so overwhelmed by the amount of response, something like over 1,200 emails being sent to our hello at, clearlyquartz.com email box about, advice about the product, the color, giving us feedback on whether this, how the solution really addresses a need that they had. So that's been, I would say, overwhelming, and being able to work on this with the team that we have has been really a great experience.
So first of all, you're getting tons of feedback here, and going forward, if you're going to make any more products, you're going to make any more improvements, you know exactly what to do based on the feedback of the community. And I think that's a really powerful component of crowdfunding. But the second one you touched on here, the fact of assembling a team. There aren't really that many products out there that just have like a one-man show where one person can do everything. Can you share with the listeners a little bit about team building and sort of your approach to that? How did you know, or how did you go about finding these different members that ended up forming the Quartz team?
Yeah, so with my co-founders at Quartz, we all come from kind of various backgrounds, from operations to consumer products to technology and sort of academia, and we all had our own network, right? So I think with anything, you always want to reach out to your own personal network, to people that you know and trust and can do the job already. And from there, we were fairly relentless about kind of building a culture and building a team that believed in what we were doing. Right. First of all, we are a product-focused company and solution-driven company, so we wanted to make sure that people were joining the team that believes in the cause. I think startup is never easy. So you want to make sure that you're also working with people that, one, enjoys what they do, and two, enjoys being around the people they're working with. We spent so many hours, I think, leading up to the campaign. We're averaging 100-hour weeks. So you really want to make sure that the fit is there. We spend a lot of time beyond just, capabilities of, are you able to design something or create something, write something, to really focus on culture and to really focus on the fit with the team, because we do spend a lot of hours together, and that, that really is important in terms of that team building process. But, also as an early startup, I think sometimes it's hard to recruit when you don't have a final product, when you don't have maybe a track record as a brand. I think, always think about recruiting as well as a two-way street, right? We're always trying to, as much as someone's trying to join your team, you're also trying to make sure that you're the right fit for them. So fit is definitely a two-way street, and, recruiting is also quite important in terms of telling the story, telling that vision that you have.
That's very well said. And I think it's difficult, particularly as a startup, to persuade people to join your team when you're still in the vision stage. You still have just the prototype. You don't have that same social proof of having a product with lots and lots of users. So I think it's a challenge for literally every entrepreneur out there, but it also can make a massive difference. And to me, just hearing the culture right now, hearing the effort that you put into this actual product, it makes me more likely to back your campaign, quite honestly, and to want to own one of these Quartz bottles. So let me ask you that. Where can people actually go and check out the product? Where can they go? Do you have a website, or should they look at the campaign? Where should they go to find out more about Quartz?
Yeah, you can either two ways. You can either go to clearlyquartz.com, and there will be a link to both some information, but also a link to our Kickstarter campaign, or you could go directly to Kickstarter and search for the Quartz bottle, and that should be the first thing that pops up. So that's the two ways, and we'll be updating the campaign page, but also our website as we go along this journey. And I think we love to engage with your listeners and continue to tell our story as we produce and launch and retail. We will also be showcasing our products at CES. So in case you or any of your listeners are going to be at CES, we do have a booth there. We're also giving away free tickets to CES with our 4-pack bottle as well.
Very cool. Awesome. I think that would be awesome too, to showcase it at CES and to like get all the actual in-person feedback and to see how people are reacting. I just have a few more questions for you here. And I think one of the problems with the crowdfunding industry, one of the reasons why I think people just look at these campaigns and they think it's unattainable. You look at your project having raised so much, and it's like, well, yeah, that guy can do it. Like, it just almost doesn't seem real. So could you share with the listeners maybe one challenge that you've had to overcome, or one problem you've had to solve, or even something that just didn't go as you anticipated, just so they can get a sense of, okay, this isn't just a guy who had like a one-hit wonder?
Yeah, no, definitely. God, where to come from? I know on the surface, right, the projects always look really well put together and great visuals, but behind the scenes, what maybe many of the people don't see is oftentimes these projects are coming together last second, or there's missing pieces and things that you're really trying to put together, especially as a startup. One story is, we had a couple different bottle designs. Actually, this was not the original bottle design that we had picked. And basically, after we did another round of surveys with their original bottle design, and basically interviewing people at Whole Foods and talking to strangers on the street and collecting data, and what we found was people had some complaints about where the thread was, the shape of the bottle, the shape of the cap. People were really divided on kind of the design. And originally that was supposed to be our final design. We were going to go to prototyping, creating a function prototype with it. And we actually had to go back and revisit that design process, that creative process. We had to invest more resources in doing that. But ultimately we decided it was worthwhile to get the bottle right. So I think really spending the time to make sure the product is right, that is one of the most important things. And I think the second part of your question was,
in terms of if something didn't go as you expected, or if you even learned something throughout the campaign, you had to change things up, anything of that nature. I'm speaking to the crowdfunders in the audience who have already launched a Kickstarter campaign, or have actually even successfully run a campaign. And the reason is, I think you will understand this pain point most. And that is, when you finally do raise money on Kickstarter or Indiegogo, the hardest part is not collecting the cash. The hardest part is shipping out all of those perks and rewards to your backers. It is a nightmare, my friends. It's a lot of spreadsheets, it's a lot of headache, and it's a lot of stress. That's why I recommend BackerKit. If you have not heard of BackerKit, they help you collect surveys, they help you collect data, and the entire fulfillment process is just so much easier and so many less spreadsheets when you use their software. You can check them out at backerkit.com and use CrowdCrux for a special discount.
Yeah, gosh, so many things didn't go as expected during the campaign or during the kind of the prep phase.
During the campaign, I was just curious.
I think I guess we ran out of some of our rewards pretty early on, so we had to kind of tweak how we were. We had, kind of just adapting our rewards and adapting our communication based on the needs of the real-time needs of our backers, right? We always anticipate that our page was going to answer so many questions. We were anticipating that certain rewards were going to do better than others. For example, we had to launch a 3-pack bottle that we did not think that we needed originally. We had overwhelming amount of interest in multi-pack, from 3-pack, 4-pack and up. So we had to launch that kind of midway through. We had to update our content to make sure that and the FAQs to make sure we address all the questions of our backers. And I also think, some of the things that we weren't thinking about were kind of like, oh, how do people pick colors? How do people input their addresses? So also some of the operational aspects of it that people don't see day to day. We're kind of had to figure that out on the fly. So there's always things that you could plan for, but even as much as you could plan for, be ready to kind of adapt on the fly and be ready to make changes as needed based on the feedback you're getting. And I think that's very important.
Even realizing that the fact that people are looking for multiple products and multiple variations and all this kind of stuff, that's kind of cool, because then you realize this entire demographic you didn't know. So like maybe families want to buy entire lineup of these bottles for their kids and for for Christmas or something like that. So it's kind of cool, you're learning all these different things as you're going through the process. And like, while yes, they are problems you have to solve, it's also giving you a ton of information about your customers. And now that's over 9,000 people. Like, that's a lot of people to ship out these rewards to. Are you going to use any kind of software to like coordinate that, something like BackerKit or etc., or are you going to do it all yourself with spreadsheets and etc.?
I think, yeah, that's something that we actually even asked some of our backers about. Would you prefer certain process? Kickstarter actually has a built-in backend as well, and overwhelmingly people prefer the third-party platform. So we are deciding between a couple of different. BackerKit is one of them that we are looking into, but it will most likely be a third party where people have the ability, and it's a little bit more robust, make that process a little bit easier. And it's sometimes worthwhile to invest in that, just so that you don't mishandle orders, or you don't mishandle some of the logistics and operations side after the campaign's over.
Justin, I just have one more question for you here before we close up the interview, and that is to give the listeners a realistic idea of, if someone wants to launch a massive campaign like yours with crowdfunding, whether it's on Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or some other type of crowdfunding platform, what can they expect to spend in terms of a budget for marketing or a budget for getting the word out? What do you think people should be budgeting for your campaigns nowadays? Because it's very different than when Kickstarter started. You can just like throw up a campaign and raise money. Now you have to go way more into the marketing of it and really sort of budget for the promotion. What do you think people should begin with for a budget in that way?
Mm-hmm. I think it totally depends on your internal goal, right? Obviously, kind of the goal on Kickstarter is not always inconsistent with the goal that you have as a team. If you started with $100,000, for example, as a kind of an internal goal, this is what we need to launch a product to take it to the next stage. Don't be shy, and also have have a stretch goal for your internal team as well. So, okay, we're budgeting for $100,000, but we hope we could hit $500,000 or $1 million, right? Or $250,000, whatever that number is. Because know your product's cost structure, know your margin structure extremely well. Make good assumptions about your shipping cost, about your operating cost, about the packaging cost, and all these things as much as you can. I've seen so many campaigns launch with kind of overpromise on the product side, but as a result of cost, whatever it is, could not deliver. Right. So be realistic with your costs, and understand what you have left over for every single product. Right. Because if your product has 10% margin, it's going to be different than a product with 30% margin in terms of what you can advertise for every dollar raised. Mm-hmm. So always think about kind of the P&L for that specific product. But I will also say, based on your internal goals, right, kind of budget for maybe a higher side opportunity, but don't spend towards that until you get the good data to show that it's working, right? If you're spending $1 to generate 50 cents, I think it's time to kind of revisit that strategy, or target differently, or change your messaging, or go back to the drawing board altogether. But if you're spending $1 to generate 10, and the message is really resonating with your consumers, be ready to scale that, right? Be ready, have a budget ready, or have something ready in your back pocket to be able to scale that to the higher goals that you have budgeted internally.
A true operations guy. That is very well said. Making sure that you're planning, you have your numbers right, all that kind of stuff. Justin, thank you for coming on, sharing just this wealth of information regarding your project. People can go and check it out at the Quartz Bottle on Kickstarter. My final wrap-up question for you is, if we could go back in time and we can talk to you just in the beginning of this phase, you're just about to launch the project, and you could share a word of encouragement, a final tip, something that you wish you knew, maybe anything like that with the audience, what would you say to yourself?
Be relentless and don't be afraid to try something. Right? If you mentioned that your listeners might look at this and think, hey, these guys must have years of experience doing Kickstarter campaigns. And some of us do, but a lot of times the market is constantly changing. You mentioned how Kickstarter works today is completely different than how it was 2-3 years ago. I would say, don't be afraid to try, and always put your backers and your consumers first. And if something, then even in the 11th hour, you have a great idea, try to make it happen. Right? If it's gonna force you to stay up all night, don't be afraid to do it and give it a shot. Because the worst thing that you can do is not try at all.
Awesome. Very well said. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate all the great information that you shared, and I wish the best for you in the future.
Thank you so much, Salvador.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Again, my name is Salvador Briggman. I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. You got something out of the show that you can apply to your own crowdfunding campaign. And from spending time with us here today, you now have a clearer sense of what you need to do if you want to raise money from the crowd. You feel a little bit more confident going into your launch for a Kickstarter campaign, an Indiegogo campaign, or quite frankly, a campaign on any other type of crowdfunding website. I love the fact that the guests are so open. They're so willing to share what's working for them, etc. I've had a lot of them on this podcast. I think we're at over 180 episodes now. So if you haven't had a chance, go and check out some of the other episodes on this podcast. It is an amazing learning center, particularly when you're commuting or you're doing something else, like you're washing dishes or you're in the car. It's a great way to get up on some knowledge, to learn a little bit as you're doing other things. And finally, if you want to learn and gain access on a more updated basis, you want to be notified of my new blog posts, of my new YouTube videos that are coming out, new podcasts I'm doing, also new content and new promotions and specials that I have going on. Sometimes I'll do web classes and webinars, these different things. If you want to be notified when those go out, you can check out crowdcrux.com/subscribe. That is crowdcrux.com/subscribe. So at that link, you'll be taken to a page. You just have to enter your email address, and I'll start sending you my weekly newsletter. So this newsletter has a lot of the information I talked about, and I also will share with you any kind of updates or things I have going on, specials, etc., via that newsletter. So you can join it at crowdcrux.com/subscribe. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast episode, and I will see you next time.